All right, folks. So at this point, we are in the first book of Samuel. First book of Samuel, and we are in chapter 21. Chapter 21 in the first book of Samuel. So at this point, David is on the run. His friend, his best friend, Jonathan, the son of King Saul, has warned him, get out because you are gonna die. There's at this point no doubt that King Saul wants to kill David for one reason or another. So David is on the run and he's just on foot. At this point, there's no horses, nothing like that. He's on the run, and let's just see what's going on. Then came David to Nob, to Ahimelech, the priest, and Ahimelech was afraid at the meeting of David, and said unto him, Why art thou alone, and no man with thee? And David said unto Ahimelech the priest, The king hath commanded me a business, and he hath said unto me, Let no man know anything of the business whereabout I send thee. And what I have commanded thee, and I have appointed my servants to such and such a place. Now therefore, what is under thy hand? Give me 5 loaves of bread in my hand, or what there is present. And the priest answered David and said, There's no common bread under mine hand, but there is hallowed bread. If the young men have kept themselves at least from women. And David answered the priest and said unto him, Of a truth, women have been kept from us about these 3 days since they came out, and the vessels of the young men are holy, and the bread is in a manner common, though it were sanctified this day in the vessel. So the priest gave him hallowed bread, for there was no bread there but the show bread that was taken from before the Lord to put hot bread in the day when it was taken away. Okay, so let's just see what's going on here. First of all, David is on the run, no military escort. There's absolutely no one with him outside of a few friends, right? So we're talking about, typically David is, he's obviously well known at this point. He's got a military escort. He's got messengers announcing that he's coming in. At this point, there's nobody. He just simply shows up with a few people around him. Obviously, he's not alone, but he has not the typical type of entourage that you would expect from someone who is King Saul's commander, right? He's one of his commanders. So Ahimelech, the priest, he's kind of like, hang on a second, what is going on? So this is what exactly is happening here. Then came David to Nob, to Ahimelech the priest, and Ahimelech was afraid. He's like, what is going on, right? At the meeting of David, and said unto him, Why art thou alone, and no man with thee? And David said unto Ahimelech the priest, The king hath commanded me a business. And he hath said unto me, Let no man know anything of the business whereabout I send thee, and what I have commanded thee, and I have appointed my servants to such and such a place. So, in a sense, David is shielding Ahimelech the priest, because David knows that if King Saul knew what was going to happen, he would absolutely annihilate Ahimelech and all the priests, right? Unfortunately, this is one of those white lies that just simply doesn't pan out the way that David wanted it to work out, right? It just simply does not. Why? Because Ahimelech and all the priests die, right? So David is trying to protect the priest by not telling him what is true. Unfortunately, it doesn't work out as intended. And of course, as I've said it multiple times, there are no spoiler alerts in this book. These priests die. I don't know at this point what to say about white lies. Obviously, David is very protective of people he encounters. He knows that he's the one that is getting persecuted. So he's trying to protect the people he encounters so that King Saul does not completely destroy them. In this instance, it doesn't work out. He does his best though, right? I mean, this is what he does. And it's how it works out. So let's see what happens next. What is David's response? The king hath commanded me a business, and he said unto me, let no man know anything of the business whereabout I send thee, and what I have commanded thee, and I have appointed my servants to such and such a place. So he is explaining to Ahimelech, the priest, that somehow King Saul has sent David on a secret mission, and therefore he is without military escort, without the royal escort, and without the royal entourage. So therefore he's showing up and he's trying to alleviate the fear that Ahimelech has at this point, right? And he succeeds. He really does. So let's see what happens next. Let no man know anything of the business whereabout I send thee, and what I have commanded thee, and I have appointed my servants to such and such a place. Now therefore, what is under thine hand? Give me 5 loaves of bread in mine hand, or what there is present. So typical David, he's just simply spitting it out the way that he is, right? I mean, he is not, as I explained last time, he does not beat about the bush much at all. He just simply says, just give me what I want, and then let's just reason about this, right? And what does the priest say? Well, there is no common bread under mine hand, but there is hallowed bread, if the young men have kept themselves at least from women. And David answered the priest and said unto him, of a truth, women have been kept from us about these 3 days since I came out, and the vessels of the young men are holy, and the bread is in a manner common. Yeah, though it were sanctified this day in the vessel. So the priest gave him hallowed bread, for there was no bread there but the showbread that was taken from before the Lord to put hot bread in the day when it was taken away. So once again, here we bring up the law. Just as I explained last time, when King Saul realizes that David is missing, and he just thinks, well, maybe he's not clean, right? This is ritually clean. So at this point, what David is doing is he's saying, give me 5 loaves of bread. And the priest says, I have no common bread. No common bread literally means no bread that is not sanctified for the Lord. And again, I'm not going to go into the law here, but typically if you were to eat common bread, if you eat this type of bread that was just, let's just call it fancy bread, right? This type of fancy bread is reserved for the priests. They have to be ritually clean. So what is the priest saying? I have no common bread. I only have hallowed bread. David is saying, give me that hallowed bread. And the priest is saying, hang on a second. What? You must meet at least one ritual, right? One excuse to be clean, and that is to be ritually clean. And he's saying you must have at least kept yourself from women for this entire time. So David is just very much, I don't know, it's very emphatic. And David says, of a truth, women have been kept from us about these 3 days since I came out, and the vessels of the young men are holy, and the bread is in a manner common. Yeah, though it were sanctified this day in the vessel. So what David is saying here is, he's emphatic. Listen, we need bread. Forget about the rituals. We definitely have kept ourselves from women for 3 days. Now, 3 days has got nothing to do with any rituals. This is not at any point in the Levitical law described as something that men have had to keep themselves from women for 3 days. It just says literally from the day. If you have kept yourself from sexual intercourse, in a sense, is what that is saying, then until the evening you cannot be eating bread, that type of bread, right? So David is just emphatically saying, Trust me, for 3 days we have been on the run, right? He's not saying it directly, but he's just implying that. We've been on the run for 3 days. Give me that bread. It is common, right? And this is one of those where Jesus Christ directly quotes in multiple gospels, because God's law matters so much more than ritual cleanliness, right? So this is what Jesus Christ, and I'm going to just read that to you. And this is in the Gospel of Luke, where Christ brings up this story saying how God cares more about humans and their own well-being more than their ritual cleanliness of the law, right? And here's what Jesus says. And Jesus answering them said, have ye not read so much as this, what David did when himself was an hungered, and they which were with him, how he went into the house of God, and did take and eat the showbread, and gave also to them that were with him, which it is not lawful to eat, but for the priests alone. And he said unto them, that the Son of Man is Lord also of the Sabbath. So this is one of the instances where the Pharisees were arguing with Christ, and they're saying, well, you're not abiding by the law because you're letting your own people eat from this, right, field. And what does Christ say? He quotes this story and says, have ye not read? Have ye not read? Right? What does he say? Have ye not read so much as this, what David did when himself was a hungered? He was hungry. And they which were with him, how he went into the house of God. So he's literally describing this episode where he goes into the priest's house, the priest meaning Ahimelech in here, and did take and eat the showbread, and gave also to them that were with him, just like Christ gave also to his apostles, right? He gave them of that field, which it is not lawful to eat, but for the priests alone. And he said unto them, that the Son of Man is Lord also of the Sabbath. The Son of Man, of course, is talking about God himself, Jesus Christ. He is the Lord of the Sabbath. And this was happening on the Sabbath in the instance of Jesus Christ. So therefore, he's got no problem telling these people what takes precedence here is human nature, right? And he's obviously in danger, so he needs to eat food. So he goes into Ahimelech and obviously asks for bread, and Ahimelech gives him bread, right? That's the whole story here. So this is what happens later. And this chapter is split between David's requisitioning the bread and then David acquiring back the sword of Goliath that he obtained after he defeated Goliath. And that chapter is split up by a very interesting story here, and I'm going to read that in just a second. And here's how that goes. Now a certain man of the servants of Saul was there that day, detained before the Lord, and his name was Doeg, an Edomite, the chiefest of the herdmen that belonged to Saul. So what happens here is, once again, chapter 21 is split up between two stories, and that story is David requisitioning the hallowed bread, and then David obtaining his own sword. And then there's this random sentence about this guy Doeg being in that house, right? So he ends up betraying David down the road. This is why this is such a critical part of this chapter. So, and I'm going to read to you what David wrote in his own poem, in his own poetry about this person named Doeg. And that is in the book of Psalms. and I'm going to open the book of Psalms, and that is Psalm number 52. And listen to how David describes the situation. It is explicitly stated in Psalm number 52 what David thinks about this person, because that person not only betrayed David, he also ended up killing the priests, right? So he's the ultimate betrayer, and he's also the ultimate, if you think about it this way, he's also described as what? He's the Doeg, the Edomite. So he's from Edom. So Edom is, of course, the area that is east of the Jordan. These are the descendants of Esau. And I talked about Esau a while back, the one who wanted to kill Jacob. It is a recurring theme, not only starting with Esau and going through David, but also going right up through Christ, because who was an Edomite, right? Later on in the Greek, obviously the New Testament is written in Greek, but who was the Edomite, the Edomian that wanted to kill Christ? That was Herod, right? Herod the king. He's an Edomian. He also wanted to kill not only Christ, and he ended up killing what? A bunch of babies. He ended up killing the male-borns of that town, right? So this is a recurring theme. So let me just read to you what David said about that person. To the chief musician, Maskil, psalm of David, when Doeg the Edomite came and told Saul and said unto him, David is come to the house of Ahimelech. This is just literally how this psalm starts. So David wrote a psalm about this specific incident, which is so brilliant, and you completely cannot separate his poetry from what happened to him, right? And here's what happens. This is verse 1. Why boastest thou thyself in mischief, almighty man? The goodness of God endureth continually. Thy tongue deviseth mischiefs like a sharp razor, working deceitfully. Thou lovest evil more than good, and lying rather than speak righteousness. Thou lovest all devouring words, O thou deceitful tongue. God shall likewise destroy thee forever. He shall take thee away and pluck thee out of thy dwelling place and root thee out of the land of the living. Selah. The righteous also shall see and fear, and shall laugh at him. Lo, this is the man that made not God his strength, but trusted in the abundance of his riches, and strengthened himself in his wickedness. But I am like a green olive tree in the house of God. I trust in the mercy of God forever and ever. I will praise thee forever, because thou hast done it. And I will wait on thy name, for it is good before thy saints. So, of course, here David is talking about how Doeg the Edomite, he chose money over God. Of course, once again, another recurring theme. What does he say? Thou lovest all devouring words, O thy deceitful tongue. God shall likewise destroy thee forever. He shall take thee away and pluck thee out of thy dwelling place and root thee out of the land of the living. The righteous also shall see and fear and shall laugh at him. Lo, this is the man that made not God his strength, but trusted in the abundance of his riches and strengthened himself in his wickedness. Right? So these are Psalm 52 verses 5 through 7 here. But obviously what David is alluding to is that he trusted not in God, but he trusted in his riches. Super recurring theme, right? You can only believe in one God. You're either going to love one and hate the other, or love the other and hate God, right? Mammon is the word used in the New Testament describing how people choose mammon, power and money, over God, and not God over power and money, and therefore they're going to suffer for it. And this is David just literally explaining that to us. All right. So, going down the road to David needs weapons, right? I mean, he's showing up. Think about it this way. He's showing up, first of all, without royal entourage, without a military escort, without messengers, meaning people who just literally announce. He's a well-known person at this point, extremely well-known. No weapons at all. A few men with him that are not obviously appearing to be part of a royal escort. So the next part is where David asks Ahimelech for a sword, for weaponry. So here's how that goes. And David said unto Ahimelech, and is there not here under thine hand spear or sword? For I have neither brought my sword nor my weapons with me, because the king's business required haste. And the priest said, the sword of Goliath, the Philistine, whom thou slewest in the valley of Elah, behold, it is here wrapped in a cloth behind the ephod. If thou wilt take that, take it, for there is no other save that here. And David said, there is none like that, give it me. Once again, typical David syntax. He's just simply saying, give me a sword, right? What is he doing? He's saying, and David said unto Ahimelech, and is there not here under thine hand spear or sword? For I have neither brought my sword nor my weapons with me. He's just running hot. He's running hot. He is probably barely dressed. No weapons, no military escort, nothing. Just simply running hot. And he's coming in, give me some bread, give me a sword, give me a spear, whatever you got, I'll take it, right? And what does Ahimelech say? The sword of Goliath the Philistine, whom thou slewest in the valley of Elah. So what that means is the sword of Goliath, whom you killed in the valley of Elah, behold, it is here wrapped in a cloth behind the ephod. So behind the ephod is essentially, it is tucked in a place that is sacred. So at that point, David's defeat of Goliath meant a whole lot to a whole lot of people. And of course, if you remember, I talked about that back then. He kept Goliath's armor, he kept Goliath's sword, and apparently Goliath's sword ended up in behind the ephod with the priest Ahimelech, right? So it's a big thing. And what does he say? It is wrapped in a cloth behind the ephod. If thou wilt take that, take it, for there is no other save that here. Essentially what he's saying, there's nothing else. That's all I got. And David said, there's none like that, give it me. He's getting his sword back. Hello, right? I mean, this is David, man. He's just, and of course, as I explained the other time, that sword was not in some sort of extraordinary measurement. It was just a normal sword, unlike the other weaponry that Goliath carried. So David just simply gets that sword and says, I got this. I'll take that. There's no better than that. So I'll take that, right? Of course, it comes in handy. Right? And then he just takes off at that point. I mean, it's kind of like a pit stop. Coming in hot, swapping out tires, and just leaving, right? And here's what happens next. And this is how it wraps up the chapter. And David arose and fled that day for fear of Saul, and went to Achish the king of Gath. And the servants of Achish said unto him, is not this David the king of the land? Did they not sing one to another of him in dances, saying, Saul had slain his thousands, and David his 10,000s? And David laid up these words in his heart, and was sore afraid of Achish the king of Gath. And he changed his behavior before them, and feigned himself mad in their hands, and scrabbled on the doors of the gate, and let his spittle fall down upon his beard. Then said Achish unto his servants, Lo, ye see the man is mad. Wherefore then have ye brought him to me? Have I need of mad men? that ye have brought this fellow to play the madman in front of my presence? Shall this fellow come into my house? Right? So the way this chapter ends is essentially David just runs away. He runs away. He runs to the king of Achish, king of Gath, and then he is, at some point, he is very fearful because these people know him. Now, once again, remember I told you that song that women sang about David is well known across the entire area. So when he goes to the king of Achish is essentially getting word from his entourage. This is David. This is that man. Isn't he the king of the land? He's that well known. So what they're doing at this point is just they're saying, you have to be aware of this man because he is extremely well known. They're singing songs about him killing our people, right? He's Achish, the king of Gath. So David becomes very fearful and he essentially feigns. He starts acting like a madman just to get away from this situation, and he definitely does. May God bless him and may God bless you.